record button. I don't need to.
No, you don't. It's recording. It's recording now.
That's on you.
Right, here we go.
Hello, everyone.
How do we do? Oh yeah, hi Patreons that are definitely watching. I'm gonna try and get into TikTok. And see what happens.
Yeah.
Not great for podcast stuff because you need something visual. But I thought like even something like when I'm editing, if there's like a funny line, I can just film the timeline playing it and be like, "Oh, sneak peek," or something. Yeah. Or here's a joke about bums.
Yeah, I mean and it's an awkward aspect ratio as well, wasn't it? Because it's generally all portrait.
I know.
So it's not even like, we can take the feed we just have automatically generated and just be like, here's this 60-second chunk. Because it involves some sort of rearrangement to make that fit the screen.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Hate it.
Yeah.
Hate it so much. Right, let's record an episode though. See where we go.
TikTok.
Here we go then. Here we go. Tick the bloody talk. Hello and welcome to another episode of the O3C podcast coming to you from O3C Games. My name is Jonathan Dunn and I'm joined by Chris Dow. That's it.
Podcasting live from planet RoboBot.
RoboBot. And we are chatting all about our video game love. We are chatting all about video games. A bit rusty, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been 4 or 5 weeks at this point.
Yeah. Right, here we go. You ready for these announcements?
Yeah.
Happy New Year! Again, I think we probably wished you a Happy New Year in both of the last couple of episodes, but we were actually recording those in 2022. So for us, in earnest at least, it's Happy New Year. And what better way to start 2023 than with some good old-fashioned tithing? After being given so much for Christmas, why not give a little back? And if you're doing that, why not give it to us? We put a lot of time, energy, effort, and finance into this podcast, and we couldn't be happier to do it just for that. But if you would like to contribute to the running of the show, give us the capability to do even more, then you can support us over at patreon.com O3C Games, and you will be rewarded for doing so from as little as £4 a month, which is about £1 an episode. You will not only be welcomed into the inner circle by way of the Patreon exclusive O3C Discord server to chat with us, the other Patreons, and a variety of other supporters, collaborators, and guests. You will also get a Candlestick Maker's dozen of exclusive full bonus episodes.
How many is that?
A butcher's farthing of bonus video content and a baker's fuck ton of deleted scenes and outtakes. And you will also get these episodes uncut and ad-free and in a video form so you can see our cheeky little faces natter on throughout 2023. So, we are back after taking a good old Christmas break.
Yes.
We hope that you and yours found rest and joy over the holidays and are managing to get through this god-awful trench of a month that is like having a hangover for 4 weeks. I fucking hate January. Awful, dreadful.
It's hard work. It is hard work.
It's awful. But we're not here to talk about our feelings on the concepts of time. We are here to talk about video games. And video games we are going to talk about. The main feature of this episode is to report back on our Christmas homework. Because there is no rest for the wicked. We are very wicked. Shut up. What is just... awful. Chris set me the task of playing James Pond 2, codename RoboCod, in a couple of different formats. And I tasked Chris with finding the best way to play the 20-plus-year-old action RPG Silver in the year of our Lord now. But before we get to that, we have a lot of gaming to report back on because we've had a break of about a month since we last talked about what we were playing and playing what we have. And Chris is going to kick us off by telling us about some of the games that were occupying his thumbs over his Santa stuffed belly.
It's a vivid image. It feels like it's been months since we last sat down to speak about our gaming activity. And as is the way with my pachinko approach to play, I've put a little bit of time into quite a lot over that time.
Standard.
Firstly, people may or may not know that for the last 5 years now, I've aimed to beat 52 games each year. And they don't necessarily have to be big, big games. And what constitutes a finish is obviously up to me, meaning that sometimes I go by getting all the achievements or trophies. Sometimes I go by reaching the credits. Sometimes I try and receive all unlockables or whatever. But anyway, when we finished recording our trilogy of festive specials that was a bit before the end of the year, I was sat at 48 games beaten with about a week left to go until the clock was going to tick into 2023. A big thing that sort of waylaid me this year was having access to the Steam Deck, because I was picking up more and more and more, and I wasn't actually giving them time to finish. So I played lots of little bits of lots of things. I definitely expanded my horizons, but I didn't necessarily get through as much as I had done traditionally. I did beat the goal narrowly, but if people want a bit of detail about the games that I played in order to do so, they can't listen to me now because it's all up on O3C.games as 2 written articles. And you can read a pair of recent articles there where I've put together essentially micro reviews of all 54 games I managed to get through in the calendar year 2022. So that's a little starter for you. When you're bored of listening to the podcast, get on your phone, get on the computer, have a little read. Let me know what you think. Now, with that challenge wrapped, I had mentioned wanting to play either Sonic Frontiers or to try and play through all of Tokyo Extreme Racer on the Dreamcast. That was kind of the ideas I set myself. I didn't beat either of those games over the break. I didn't even unwrap Sonic Frontiers, but I did play another 5 or so hours of Tokyo Extreme whilst Sonic is still on the shelf. Every bit of media relating to Sonic Frontiers still blows so hot or cold that I genuinely don't know what I'll get when I finally put it on. Like, going by critique, it's in contention for both the best and worst of last year, depending on who you listen to. And it simultaneously seems to be the game that Sonic fans have wanted for years, as well as an abomination to the fan base. It's a modern, forward-thinking platformer and a relic of the 2000s. Like, it's everything all at once. And I do still want to play it, and I do still intend to play it, but I've been busy with some other bits that I will mention now. Now, on the Steam Deck, I've naturally played a range of odds and sods, as is now standard. I still love it more than any other piece of hardware I think I've ever owned. It truly is just the thing I never knew I wanted as much as I did. It has really, really plugged every hole in the way I play games. I started a new game on Thumper one evening, and that's been a Laura fun. I know this is a game that is extremely optimized because it runs perfectly on the PS4 or on mobile or via VR or on the Switch. But even so, I was playing on the deck through the dock to the TV, and I could have the choice of either 60 frames a second at full 4K, unwavering, or a regular 1080p at 120 frames a second with the highest possible smoothing and anti-aliasing. Like,
does your TV support that?
It doesn't, but it does in terms of the input polling, so it feels smoother, even though my TV is only a 60 frames display, if that makes sense. I've always said that VR was the only way to really play this game, and although I'd still lean in that direction if given the choice, having that higher frame rate and it being more responsive has made the flat version of the game much more playable than I remember. And I'm now 3 S-ranked stages down and counting again on this particular play. The vibe of this game is still unreal. It's just so claustrophobic and hellish, and more than anything else, it's hard as nails. It's so difficult. I mentioned before that I think you have to have a musical ear to have any hope of surviving in Thumper, and this playthrough is really confirming this, because obstacles just don't follow conventional rhythm game patterns. And this is technically still just a game of call and response, like Parappa, when you break it down, because every visual obstacle that you're contending with is telegraphed a full bar prior with a sound. So you could play it blind if you really wanted to challenge yourself. But where Parappa is a game that's But where Parappa is a game that's built around pretty simple on or offbeat patterns, Thumper operates so often in those gaps in between those. And you need a really decent understanding of and the ability to feel complicated subdivisions of time, even in standard time signatures, to have any chance at all. I am obviously not into the late game yet, but even as a musician of 20 plus years and as someone who has beaten this game with all S ranks, stage 9 in particular, the final one, gives me the fear. It's hard work. Something a lot softer I have also played a decent whack of Fairy Solitaire with Georgia
I love
relaxing
that
on the couch, because mouse control maps pretty well to a pad. If you're playing it in handheld, you can obviously use the touchscreen itself or the touchpads as little sensors. And although having a controller in your hand isn't quite as nice as using those more direct methods, the core addictiveness of this experience is still there. And Georgia hadn't played it before. I kind of taught her the rules very quickly, and then she was immediately immersed. You know, we sat down, we got a 20 chain of cards going the other day, and past 5, every single card, one of us was going, oh, at increasing volumes. Like, it's so simple. There's nothing to this game at all. There is absolutely nothing to it, but it's really, really good. As one of those kind of very quick pick up and play things, it's fantastic. Would you like to tell me about some of your stuff?
Well, the last time we chatted, I said that I made a start on the fairly new roguelite bullet hell game, Vampire Survivors.
Yes.
Everybody was seeming to be playing at that time, and I suspected that it was going to keep me entertained for the entire Christmas period. It did. I managed to pour 80 hours into it.
Oh, naturally.
Got all the Steam achievements for the base game and the DLC. But weirdly, there's not much to talk about with it, because it is such a simple game. You fight off waves of enemies, leveling up, getting passive and active items to make you stronger, and then you just check off completing different arenas with different levels with different characters, and you keep unlocking more and more stuff until you're done. I also don't think it's a hard game at all. Like, once you've got a bit of experience and get an idea for what builds are going to work best and how to evolve the weapons with the right active passive pairings, then it's literally just a case of doing it, which, whilst it may not sound exciting, it is incredibly satisfying.
Yeah.
Like when you get that like really, really overpowered setup in something like Binding of Isaac and just enjoy wiping out hordes and hordes of enemies. It helps that, in Vampire Survivors, you've always got a larger objective to strive for, as the game does point you in a lot of the right directions of how to unlock all the various things, even some of the secret things. You're given nicely cryptic messages to sort of give you something to try at least. So you're always playing with a slightly different intention. And it was just exactly the type of low effort, unchallenging gaming experience that I needed to help wind down after, a pretty hectic year. And I have no doubt that when the next bit of DLC is released, I'll buy that and I'll jump back in. And I mean, I've even started a new save file on it on my phone, because they haven't added cross save support yet, which I think is coming. But it is absolute kudos to the developers who have been quite public in saying that they struggled to find a mobile developer for the game because they couldn't find somebody to partner with who wasn't insistent on like monetizing it within an inch of its life.
Yeah.
And so they took the decision to say, no, we're going to develop it in-house. It means that it's going to take longer because we're just doing it ourselves and we don't really do mobile ports and stuff like this, and we want to get it right. But absolute respect to them for doing that, and it makes for a much better experience. So for now, before I can put my save onto my iPhone, it's just nice to just have it there and just keep getting those little serotonin boosts. Like, I mean, I'm not going to put like 80 hours into it. I'm not going to complete this as a save. Well... I'm not. But it is nice to have it on my phone if I need that hit. It's like how you feel about Tetris.
Yeah. Would you believe me if I said that I've actually played the first little chunk of Vampire Survivors as well? Would anyone believe me?
I don't know. You're not really one for a bandwagon hop.
No, well, this is it. I mean, I put off starting this game despite having it in my Steam library from a previous recommendation. I think, obviously, I checked when you mentioned it at Christmas. I already had it. And then I thought back to when have I bought this? Someone at work recommended it. Like, it's going right back. So it's obviously, it's spread. People were talking about this game outside of just, like, the sort of niche core that you might expect. But because it had this critical mass behind it, I find it really hard to then pick stuff up right in the center of like the lens of zeitgeist being the thing that's driving me playing it. It was the same reason as a different sort of medium. When Squid Game came out on Netflix, I thought I'll probably enjoy this, but that is all anyone is talking about.
Yeah.
And I don't want to watch it through that prism of being the thing that everyone is talking about. I want to just give it a bit of time, let the dust settle, then I can actually appraise it as something that is good or bad, but that's on me to decide.
Yeah, so, that's why I haven't watched it yet either.
Yeah, it's good. It's decent.
Well, don't say that, because now I'm not going to watch it for another 6 months.
But when I did finally sit down and play Vampire Survivors, I could tell straight away that this is, as you mentioned, an incredibly simple game, but an incredibly well-tuned game. Like, it's got such just a simple concept. It's not a million miles away from Half Minute Hero on the PSP years back, and that was a game that was trying to cram the main elements of an RPG into, as the title suggests, 30-second chunks. But this is even more distilled somehow. Like, runs are longer than that, but the gameplay loop of just being get the experience, get better, get more experience, get better. It's very, very pure. Yeah. And I think the thing that always lets me down in this sort of game, not specifically this kind of bullet hell, whatever you'd call it, but this type of game as roguelikes and roguelites, is that I don't have a head for stats or synergies or number strategy. And if I think about the way I played Binding of Isaac, or the hundreds of times I've played it, every run I've had over the years has felt like I'm just going in blind, even after I've sat and played it for 20 hours across a few weeks. Like, it's much the same with any of these sort of games that I've dabbled with since. I just sit there in the moment, making stupid choices and decisions, going, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. And then I start again and do the same thing again. Yeah. Now, a game I actually put more time into than the 2 or 3 hours I've played Vampire Survivors is a pretty blatant, not necessarily copy, but certainly inspired by a game called Brotato.
Just before you jump onto that, just want to say, I found one of the best things about Vampire Survivors is the fact that they've really gone quite minimalist with synergies. There aren't, synergies aren't a thing. You basically, the way that you evolve a weapon is basically the equivalent of getting like a good synergy of 2 items in Binding of Isaac or something like that. Yeah. So, and then you can view those pairings on your pause screen as well.
I've unlocked that now. I have got to the point where I have access to that. So it's kind of guided.
Once you figure out kind of what actually pairs with what, you know that's it then, and it's like, oh, cool. Well, I know that if I'm playing with a character that starts with a lightning ring, then I need to probably prioritize finding a duplicator, which I know is the passive that's going to pair with that to allow me to evolve the lightning ring. And then you can base your runs then around that. So you can be like, okay, well, what 6 weapons do I want to try this time? And then you know what combos you need to get to evolve all of them and get really overpowered. And it just makes it again. It's just you just don't need to use your brain. It's great. I love it.
A game that I've actually put more time into than the 2 or 3 hours I played Vampire Survivors is a pretty blatant, not necessarily copy, but certainly inspired by a game called Brotato.
I saw this and thought, I really want to play this, and then thought, I don't have 80 hours and a Christmas break.
The big difference here is that it's a direct-controlled twin-stick shooter, as opposed to just being about movement. And I think that's what got me interested initially, because even if now, having played both, I think Vampire Survivors is a much better, more tightly designed game, having more direct control just felt a bit better to begin with. Yeah. The main change also outside of the way it controls is the way that upgrades are managed. So rather than just surviving until you hit an experience cap and then getting to level up, in Brotato, you're aiming to hold on for a wave of enemies at a time, and then you get access to like a shop every 60 seconds or however long a round is. And that's where you spend your earnings and try to spec your potato in whatever build style you want. Kind of like Snake RX. It works quite similarly to that. But here, there's far more opportunities to become the sort of ambient ball of death you can in Vampire Survivors, because you're constantly swapping in weapons and other kind of effects and things that are just endlessly layering on top of your character. I'm not any good at it, of course. And just like Vampire Survivors, I haven't really got my head around what items I should be going for, what I'm looking for that's going to complement the things I've already got. And I'm sure I am frequently buying items that probably immediately nullify those I've already leveled up. Because I just don't think, it's like, well, that's got a green number, so that must be better. And I'm not checking that it's also got a red number that means something else is going to get worse. Yeah. But I really enjoy the loop of it. And having twin stick input makes it feel more like I'm playing Geometry Wars, the roguelike, rather than the kind of avoid 'em up gameplay that you have at the first 3 hours of Vampire Survivors whilst you're building up and getting somewhere. But yeah, both good games. I'd recommend them both, even as a casual person like me.
I would like to give Brotato a go. I do really like how, it's why I can play Vampire Survivors on my phone, because you don't need any button inputs. It is just sliding your finger around, and because all you need to do is move your character. That's entirely it. Otherwise, I wouldn't even bother trying to play. It's not like Dead Cells or something. I think, I'll start a new save file on my phone. It's like, no, because it's going to play like an absolute piece of wank. Although, speaking of mobile games, I have actually played a couple of other casual games on my mobile over Christmas, if you're interested.
Yes, I'm always interested.
So I actually finished all of the puzzle packs on Bonza, which is quite an achievement, because there's hundreds of puzzles on there. And now I'm ploughing through the next Bonza game, which also includes jigsaw puzzles in there as well. So that's quite nice.
Yeah.
But it's more of the same, and it's nice. But I have actually picked up another game, a casual game, just to play, and it does come with a bit of a challenge to myself, because I've been playing the latest casual Angry Birds game called Dream Blast, and I basically just want to see how long I can enjoy the game without paying money into it.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly simple game. You just get a bunch of balls drop into a gravity well, and you need to match them. And if you match 4 of them, it turns into a bird. And then if you match 2 birds, it turns into a bigger bird. And then you just got to clear the stage and with the criteria, whatever. It's very relaxing and very satisfying to play when you sort of get all those things going. And so far, I haven't felt the need to pay into the game to buy like extra power ups, or it's got one of those fucking energy meters. But like they are quite generous with what they give you, and usually like if you watch one ad, you'll get like infinite energy for 15 minutes. Yeah, and it's like, that's probably all I'm going to play it for.
Yeah, and that's all you need.
I'm going to enjoy playing it more than 5 times, and my energy meter runs out or whatever. I've got to a point where if you win, I think like 3 or 4 levels in a row without losing, you build up a winning streak, which means you start with certain power-ups and stuff like that. And so it's really encouraging you not to lose your winning streak, because you'll be at a massive disadvantage, especially if you lose a level that with your advantage, and then you're saying, you want to replay it without your advantage? Well, go on then. Or you can pay. And I haven't done that, and which is good. I'm not going to pay into it. I'm like, there's absolutely no reason to. It's not. There's no desire for me to play it any longer than I'm enjoying it, because I've got loads of other games I can play, like Bonza or Vampire Survivors. But yeah, I know that I will hit a point at some point, because that's what these games are designed to be. There'll be a level that is just monstrously unfair that you can't beat unless you have a power up, and then you can grind to get some, maybe, or do, I don't know, but we'll see. It's a nice little game. It's a nice addition to my little phone, and portrait mode. One thumb.
He loves portrait mode,
which you can do with Vampire Survivors as well on phone. You can play it with one hand. It's magic. Oh, danger though, isn't it? Danger. I might not put money into it, but by God, I'll put time in.
Then you are the product.
Yeah, I'm having fun being the product, though.
Is this my turn again?
Yeah.
I've also sent you something digitally.
God. Oh, no.
I don't know how you check it.
Hey! Thank you very much. That's nice. Bonza! From Matt Letitia.
Right.
For Patreon viewers, because obviously I'm cutting this out of the episode.
Yeah.
Chris has gifted me a copy of Brotato on Steam.
Brotato. Right. 2 games that featured in my highlights of 2022 have both been in the news recently, because Chocobo GP and Babylon's Fall, both live service connected Square Enix ventures, are both having their wings clipped less than a year after their launch.
I didn't even see that. No, you must be devastated.
Whilst this is less of an issue for Chocobo, because all they're doing is they're saying we're not adding any more fresh content. You know, you can still play online. We've still got the GP mode and everything else. We're just not adding more tracks and stuff like that. Babylon's Fall is more of a problem because it's totally online. And that means at the end of February, the game is done. Like, the whole thing is finished. Because, you know, as an online hack and slash RPG looty thing, when the server isn't there, the game isn't there. So it is gone in entirety and in perpetuity in just a few weeks. So it's meant over the last fortnight, I'd say, I've jumped back in pretty hard to try and wipe out the last few trophies I had before they are completely unobtainable. Because I put enough time into it that I thought I should at least try and beat what was offered. And I got through the story mode just this last weekend, so I beat all those, and now I'm on to kind of the post-game grind as I'm attempting to up my power level to a certain value so I can do other more challenging quests and knock out the last few trophies of just pure attrition at this stage, like a certain amount of armor pieces and a certain amount of currency and things like that. I'm enjoying the game less than I was, I will say that, for playing it the way I am having to at the moment. Because whereas before the lack of players and difficulty matchmaking with the players that were there was kind of a minor inconvenience, and I could just do a level solo and it was okay, I'd just, you know, grind through it, take a little bit longer. It's a lot bigger an issue when there's a big calendar ticking down in the background. Because if I can do a level in 15 minutes, great. If I have to then do it solo and it takes me half an hour, that's a lot more dead time.
Yeah.
As the game was previously predicated on having this like battle pass and in-game seasons and everything else as well, there's always been a big countdown at the top of the hub world letting you know how long until the content's going to refresh and a new season started. Yeah. But now that the clock is a countdown to the game's death now, the days remaining up there are not just reflecting the season's duration, but the entire lifespan of the game.
They need to replace it with the moon from Majora's Mask.
They do. That would get me going.
Yeah.
Because of the difficulty of the late game stuff I'm trying to beat, like I said, it's been harder to solo through missions like I was doing before. And whereas sometimes I could just sit half paying attention until a game came up and then I could join and whatever else. Now, if I sit down to play for an hour, I want to actually come away with an hour's progress. And because that's still quite difficult, because there's a lot of people doing the same thing as me, but it's got such a shit matchmaking system that it's like, if you don't have the same level unlocked, you can't play together. If you're like very disparate power levels, there's a problem. If you choose someone's doing a quest, but someone's doing a siege, which is just two different names for the same level, you can't get in a game together. It's annoying. Will I finish it in time? Probably at this stage, because I don't think I've got that much more to do. I'm very much in final grind territory, but we will see on that one. I don't know. A much less stressful game I've been playing at bedtime is one that I've mentioned before, and that is Pokemon Picross on the Game Boy Color again.
Oh.
And
yeah, I haven't played that one, have I?
It's good. It's really good. Like the translation of the leaked ROM got an update semi-recently, and this is now basically an entirely complete Jupiter-helmed Picross game, preserved and playable when otherwise it would have been lost. You know, it came out of that big Nintendo leak. I had been playing this on my 3DS of an evening, back when I was playing it before, but for some reason I started a fresh save on the Steam Deck about a month back. And again, I'm just having a nice time picking through a few boards before sleepy beepies, like the last little bit of the evening, because I don't have to focus too much. I'm quite good at Picross these days. It's just spotting patterns and then chucking little squares in. The reason I think I'm drawn to this entry particularly, rather than one of, say, the Picross S games on the Switch, is that to accommodate the smaller screen and pixel resolution of the Game Boy Color, puzzles never get that taxing. And the largest panels, they are never going to stretch to being greater than 20 by 20. And even then, they're split up into 4 bite-sized 10 by 10s to make the 20 by 20. And it just means it's really brisk. You know, a puzzle's never more than a few minutes long. And a challenge comes not from making a mistake 20 minutes ago into a huge board and then having to redo the whole thing, but more from just aiming to hit the tight par times on each stage, because then you're rewarded with a Master Ball clear rather than a regular old Pokeball clear. And I'm probably halfway through the game now, 6 or 7 hours in. I'm just having a nice time. It's a good thing to just chip away. In final sadder news, owing to unexpected car repairs at the start of January that ended up being quite costly, because the springs in my front suspension just sheared off while the car was parked before I went back to school. I'm having a big sell-off of most of my Vita collection to fund my automotive solvency. And I don't know if anyone is listening who is particularly interested in collecting for the Vita and things like that, but if there are listeners, especially those in the UK, that might be after some of the Vita's limited print treasures, please do get in touch, because I've opened up my Twitter account again after going dark for a couple of months. So I'm back at Chaz_Hodges. That's the place to DM me if you're after any Vita gear in particular. It's reached that point now where, since I've sold a few of the big hitters already, I'm no longer in that mindset where I'm like, well, I could get a full set of games one day. And so it's much easier for me to just go, well, it's a fire sale. Let's just get rid of fucking everything. So the Vita is on the chopping block. If you want some games, I'm your man.
Well, there we go. I've played some other bits and bobs.
Of course you have. It's been months.
It has. I know it has. I've been chipping away at Mario and Rabbids Sparks of Hope, which is absolutely superb.
Yeah,
it's basically evolved the game so much in every single way. Like, every single thing that was great about the first game has been made even better. And like there's more overworld stuff. The battles are more dynamic. There's just so much more stuff going on. It's absolutely brilliant. It's such a quality game. It's so well made. It's really like I saw that like Ubisoft had said, oh right, yeah, there's 3 games that we had announced that are coming out that are not coming out now because not bothered or whatever, and they've just been like really cutthroat with like taking franchises on. And they said that Mario and Rabbids has been underperforming despite it having absolutely superb reviews, which means that it might be a series that isn't actively developed further, which would be a huge shame because it's real quality. And you know, they didn't rush out a sequel.
It took years, didn't it? It took years.
Yeah. And there is still, I assume there is still the Rayman DLC to come for it, which I'm really looking forward to seeing how on earth that works. The Donkey Kong DLC for the first Mario and Rabbids was brilliant. It really changed a lot of aspects of the gameplay. So I imagine it'll be a similar sort of thing with this. Also on the Switch, so even before our end of year special went out, I was undermined in my games of 2023 I was looking forward to section, because Sports Story, the long-awaited sequel to Golf Story, shadow dropped onto the eShop just before Christmas. And as I said, I would do, I buy it day one and play nothing else. Unfortunately, I don't know why they released it, because it's really unfinished. It's riddled with bugs and pacing issues. It's slow, it's plodding, it's imprecise. I mean, surely any benefit they would have had by releasing it in time for Christmas would have been like significantly negated by this horrendous bad press it's getting.
Yeah.
Like, they're continuing to patch the game, obviously, because, you know, well, I assume they were planning on finishing it anyway, so they may as well do it now.
Not sure I'll get to that.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm just going to pretend that it hasn't been released yet. And when, like, I don't know, 1.3 or whatever, it's had a few updates and people are saying, yeah, okay, this is good to go now, then I'll be like, oh my God, Sports Story's finally out, and give it another go. But yeah,
Take two.
It's a game. It's a game that looked and was shaping up to be an absolute banger, but has so far fallen woefully short. Which leads me on nicely to another game I played, which was a game that looked and was shaping up to be an absolute stinker, a colossal joke of a game, a total artistic and economic failure, but has ended up being an extraordinarily enjoyable game, which literally wowed me from start to finish as I 100%ed it over the course of about 20 hours. And that, my friend, is Sonic Frontiers.
Oh my gosh.
This game took me, I mean, I am as surprised as anyone else. Basically, I played the demo on the Switch when that dropped, and whilst it was a technical shithouse of a game, I could see the seeds in there of a game that I could potentially really enjoy.
Yeah.
So I just decided to plump for the PS5 version, even though I couldn't find it like on sale anywhere or anywhere much below RRP. But honestly, I do not regret spending a single penny of that price now. It's it's got no right. It's got absolutely no right. I mean, the open world that the game is set in, you're basically set across 5 islands, so it's sort of 5 open zones.
Yeah.
And they are expansive enough to enjoy being fast in 3D space rather than feeling just horrendously imprecise, which I felt 3D Sonic has been in the past.
Yeah.
But it's got enough space for you to feel fast, but also not to make clumsy mistakes and stuff like that. The thing that surprised me most about the game is how collectathon-y it is. I mean, it may as well be like a N64 style, 3D platformer rare type collectathon game. I spoke, not when was it, when you set me Unbox Newbie's Adventure.
A month or so ago.
Yeah, and I love that. I absolutely love that game, and there's something just really nice and gentle and straightforward about collectathon games. And having that, like, in a Sonic context, where they've put real thought into how you move around these open zones, the different puzzle elements that are in there, it reminded me of 2 things. Firstly, it reminded me of Sonic Jam.
The open world bit at the beginning, the museum section. Yeah.
So Sonic Jam was a collection of Sonic 1, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, and Sonic & Knuckles on the Sega Saturn. And in addition to having those 4 games emulated and a few other like museum and galleries and videos and stuff like that, it was they had this little 3D hub that was you could just run around in as Sonic. There were little objectives you could do. So you got like an award for like collecting 100 rings or finding like 5 red coins. The standard sort of collectathon-y type thing. And I loved that in Sonic Jam. I played that loads, and I just really enjoyed it, But the other thing that Sonic Frontiers really reminded me of is the new Bowser's Fury section that came out with Super Mario 3D World.
Yeah.
Which was open world exploration with platforming and puzzle elements scattered around. I hope it's what the future of Mario is going to be, because I think it's such a dynamic way of presenting, these things as like interconnected ideas. But Sonic Frontiers has nailed it, really, to be honest. I mean, like, you've got there's a few things that you will come across on these different islands. There's little packs of enemies that are there, and they're all quite different and have different ways to dispatch. There are bigger enemies called Titans, which are sort of like mini bosses, and they're a lot bigger. They require a lot more strategy to beat, but they're fantastic. Then, but there's not too much. Like it doesn't feel like you're playing an action game. It still feels like you're exploring. And then you get map markers that will have a puzzle that you need to solve, and that will unlock a part of the map so you can see a bit further. And these little elements, I mean, the amount of variety in these is ridiculous. Some of them will be like, hit this switch. Some of them will be like, here's a ball, hit it through this hoop. Some of it will be, run through these rings, or a little time trial. Some of it will be like, jump this rope. Some of it will be, do a dance. Some of it will be, there's some like 2D shoot 'em up thing where you're inside a computer. Basically, like every single idea you could possibly throw into the mix were there, and it meant that it was always interesting and always entertaining to play, because you never knew what was going to happen, and it really benefited you to unlock parts of the map, so then you could then fast travel around it and all of that stuff. But you never use fast travel, because, like Spider-Man on PlayStation, it's more fun just to travel around, just to take the long way around. It's much more fun.
Scenic route.
Yeah, take the scenic route. and a big thing that goes along to develop this is the implementation of the different platforming elements that are in Sonic Frontiers. Mostly the ancient rails, as they're called, which is basically just like the rails that Sonic likes to grind on.
He loves it.
And
Fucking loves
bloody
it.
loves that. Bloody loves it. They're everywhere, and when you like beat certain challenges and stuff, more will appear that will connect areas that you've been to, and then these might be combined with with like a little short platforming section that will allow you to get some rings and some other collectibles and stuff like this. And basically, there's always stuff. There's always something wherever you end up. There's always something you think, oh, that looks fun. It's a spiral or something, that'll be fun. Or I'll just go and do that. Oh, what's that? What's this? What's that? What's this? It's a joy to spend time, and a lot of that is down to the brilliance of the soundtrack. And this, like, it's one of the best gaming soundtracks I've ever heard.
Christ.
Yeah. The title of the soundtrack album is Stillness and Motion.
Yeah.
And it combines these two main elements that come to form the soundtrack to this game. So you've got the stillness, which is the sort of ambient atmospheric music that goes with each island. Each of them has about 6 or 7 movements to it. Yeah. With the sort of the main sort of themes and motifs of the island theme being developed and sort of rising in various different emotions and all of that. And then it's just stunning. It's so beautiful. And it's just like, it just means that like you can just enjoy just standing still in this world, having a little look around, looking at the beautiful environment. I mean, if you're not moving as well, you won't notice some of the unnecessary pop-in that's there with some elements, which is a bit of a shame. Bye, Georgia.
Have a fun work. Bye-bye. I won't be here. I'm going to go to work. Love you. Bye-bye.
And to be honest, like the pop-in didn't really bother me too much. Like it's a bit of a shame because it does, like when you've got all of these cool platforms and rails sort of woven into the environment, it does feel quite organic, like a sort of weird ancient place. But then when you see those elements appearing, it does sort of take you out of it, a little bit. It's like, like in old cartoons when it'd be like, well, I know that rock's going to fall. It's clearly not. It's not a watercolor. It's clearly somebody drawing it on paint. But it never, like the pop-in never affected the gameplay for me at all. Like I could always see where I was heading to, not just flinging myself into the yonder, hoping the draw distance would catch up and give me somewhere to land. But I cannot overstate just how good the soundtrack is to this game. Not just there's 2 hours of beautiful ambient atmospheric music that will rival even the incredible work in Breath of the Wild. Yeah, it's more developed than that. Like not in terms of just in terms of its complexity. It's doing more. But it's absolutely stunning. But then you do have the flip side of that soundtrack album, Stillness and Motion. You have the motion section, which is what goes with one of the other elements that are scattered around the islands, which are these I think in the game they're like portals to cyberspace, and basically it's a Sonic level to play. Yeah. So you go, you hit one of these things, you unlock it, and then you go and do a level. And for a start, the levels themselves, they actually feel like they're straight out of Sonic Generations, which is a really good thing, because like some of the levels are presented in 2D, like sort of 2D scrolling, and then you get like the more downhill, 3D stages. Yeah, they're all quite short. They're always quite short. All of them are under 2 minutes, which makes like them feel manageable. And they've always got 4 criteria for you to unlock, so you can play through them several times in several different ways to get all of those. The only downside to these levels is that they're actually just reusing the level themes straight out of Sonic Generations. So you've got Green Hill levels, Chemical Plant levels, Marble Garden levels, and then some miscellaneous city theme. And whilst, it's nice to see these environments, it would have been great to see more original designs to help this game stand apart, a little bit more, or even like revisiting some other themes from previous games, like having
there's been a lot.
A Sandopolis theme or a Rusty Ruins theme or an Angel Island theme, or, but maybe next time. But the music that goes along with these sections is like straight out of Sonic R. It's well, not quite.
Nothing's like the music out of Sonic R.
No, and that's probably a good thing, to be honest. But there's every type of music under the sun, all like on this soundtrack, and it makes every single part of playing this game a real joy, because not only does it look and feel really smooth and slick to play, it sounds absolutely brilliant to play. Yeah, I mean,
Game of the year.
Well, it's not, but hang on, I've still got more to say. I've just been attacking this in all kinds of orders that I didn't write. One of the things that looked the stupidest on all of the videos I saw of it beforehand was the combat system in the overworld.
Yeah,
I touched on it a little bit, saying there were enemies and titans to battle, and like the way they described it was you basically had your homing attack, and it just looked like you were just hitting that, and it just looked really bland. But like, the combat does mostly still revolve around one button, but then there's loads of combos to learn, there's loads of special moves to unlock to spice things up, and the enemies get more advanced across the islands, so you need to approach them more strategically. And it is but it's really good fun. It just feels really good. Like, it feels very responsive. A lot of that, with the rumble feedback on the controller as well, like, just works really well. Everything just feels just zippy and precise. And the Titans and the main boss fights, honestly, the main boss fights, they're really outstanding. They've got great design. They're always huge. They're always keeping you on your toes. But it also make sure to feel fun and cool to pull off like various little things with a few like quick time moments weaved in, not too many. Like these main island boss fights, they reminded me of Bayonetta, or like another like Platinum game, with that sense of scale and chaos going on, making you feel like an absolute combat wizard, even though you were really only pressing left and right and hit. But you can always see like the main island bosses around the island you're on, looming over you until you face it, and that's just really, really cool. I mean, excuse me. I honestly don't have a bad word to say about this game.
Game of the year.
Like, even it's not Game of the Year because it came out last year.
Game of last year.
Elden Ring.
Second place.
We're not having that conversation right now. We're not. But like, even something like the story in the game, like, I mean, I didn't really have any interest in the story. That's not why I was playing the game. It was like when Sega crowbarred story into Super Monkey Ball. It's like, you're not here for the story. Dr. Bad Boon and the monkey chimps. It was just like, you're not there for the story. You're there for the gameplay. And but having said that, the story in Sonic was surprisingly good, and I skipped a lot less cutscenes than I thought I was going to. And I can't even believe I'm saying it, but it was genuinely quite moving at the end.
Shed a tear on the credits.
It's played really, really straight and quite sort of grounded and earnest, which I thought would have been a big mistake, and for some people it might be. But then also Ben Schwartz isn't doing the voice of Sonic, which at first I thought was a real shame because he works so perfectly as the voice of Sonic in the films. But then actually having Sonic sound more like a man than a small boy child,
John
probably
Ralph,
actually did this. Yeah, John it's so good though. It's so good. It probably helped the story beats land. But yeah, I mean, I like I said, I do not have a bad word to say about it. Don't play it on the Switch. Fucking hell, it was awful. But the PS5 version, like I said, it's a shame about some of the pop-in, but it doesn't really ruin the gameplay at all. It's enough to lose it a point. It's a 9 out of 10 game.
Jesus.
Yeah, that's my review. 9 out of 10. Sonic Frontiers. Absolutely incredible. I really want you to play it.
I mean,
it genuinely is the 3D Sonic game that I've wanted.
Your review...
I've never enjoyed more than 20 minutes of a 3D Sonic game before.
Your review has certainly bumped it up the pecking order. You know, I'm trying to plan out the next little chunk of gaming time for myself this year, and I know that obviously I've got to keep playing Babylon's Fall for a bit to get that licked and finished. But then after that, the PS5 is just going to be sitting there, disk drive empty, ready to go. So maybe I will finally, in the next week or so, take the seal off and crack into Sonic Frontiers. 9 out of 10. Jonathan Dunn.
Yeah.
You heard it here.
Fortnite report! So we are
gathered here today.
So we set each other Christmas homework for our last fortnight report. Not
we did.
Fortnight. It was a month.
Double fortnight.
And in fact, this is actually going to be the last fortnight report we do for a little while, just to because our lives and times are increasingly busy.
Yeah.
That it's difficult to fit in. Difficult to fit in required playing in addition to playing to really enjoy. So we're still going to be doing the Playdate episodes, but we're gonna shelve fortnight reports for a little bit until we have a little bit more time to dedicate to it. But we have not scrimped on our homework over this festive period because I have played James Pond 2, Codename RoboCod.
Correct.
It's got 2 colons.
It does. It's an ugly title.
It's not the best.
They were going
really
for too many
puns.
They were going for too many puns. What are you parodying? Choose one.
Exactly. It really confused me as a child. I remember seeing somebody playing it on Games Master, and being and thinking that James Bond and RoboCop were the same thing.
They could be. You've seen them in the same room.
That's a thinker.
Well,
but I have played it on both its original format and the Game Boy Advance newer version of it, and I'm going to be telling you about that. But Chris, first of all, is going to tell me how he got on with one of my favourite games that I played on a PC when I was a kid. It's called Silver. It was actually in my honourable mentions for my original top 100 list, so I hold it in very high regard. It had a Dreamcast port. It had a very revolutionary mouse-based movement-y combat thing that I knew wouldn't map very well to a controller if we were looking to play it on the Steam Deck. But I know that, the Dreamcast version was there and had already been ported, and I was very intrigued to see, 1, how you would enjoy the game, and 2, how best you think the game could be enjoyed. Chris?
Well, Silver. Getting the easy stuff out of the way first. Obviously, when you set the challenge, you said, what's the best way to play it? Then in 2022, now in 2023, if you were sat at a desktop, the Steam port is more than serviceable, as I think it's had basically a native rebuild at some point in the not too far flung past. So everything's mapped perfectly to keyboard and mouse. All the graphics scale up nicely. The UI works for modern systems. It's easy to just boot it up. It's no problem. If you're playing on Steam Deck like I have been, you can also play the native Steam version if you want. There's some pretty good community controller layouts that you can apply that move the contextual swordplay stuff to a combination of triggers and trackpad swipes. And it does work. I played the first sort of 15 minutes and I was like, yeah, this is serviceable. I could do this. But as you've mentioned and alluded to streamline everything, I suggest just grabbing the Dreamcast port because content-wise, it's pretty much identical. With upscaling, it looks just as sharp, and the controls have already been consoleized. There's no additional wrapper you're working through to get it working. It's just as they were at the time. The game, then, it's an action RPG. As you mentioned way back on the honourable mentions list, it has very sincere, very straight, very down the line voice acting.
Yeah, it does.
And it certainly gives the game a flavour of its own. I'll say that.
Yeah.
The game world, at least the way it's presented, looks like the overworld sections of Final Fantasy VII. So it's got pre-rendered backgrounds, but with these chunky polygonal characters romping around on top. But the voice acting gives it all a sort of thespian vibe that Square's game just does not manage, because that was a game of text boxes rather than fully voiced dialogue. In the game, the antagonist of the world, a big meanie, titularly named Silver, decides one day that it's wife-in time, and rather than bother with traditional courtship, decides to just gather up every single woman alive in the game's region of Jara and have them shipped to his quarters so that he can choose his partner, like a modern-day meat market.
Yeah, call me outrageous, but you can't argue with his efficiency.
Exactly. I mean, he stays put as well. They come to him. This is easy, as easy as it's going to be. The main player character...
you can't spell concubine without you and I.
The main player character, a wet flannel of a man named David, takes umbrage with his wife Jennifer being whisked from their bucolic existence, and along with his grandfather, that you have quoted several times already, takes off to give rescue. Now, one thing I did notice within my very first half an hour of play is that Silver is a brisk game. Like, the site How Long to Beat suggests it's about 10 hours all in, but the pace at which the game motors along in its first few hours makes me question how it's possible for the game to last that long, considering within my first play session, I'd already left my village, fought through a band of Silver's enforcers, wept as I watched the boat carry Jennifer away in real time, smashed through a bandit camp, befriended the camp's denizens, entered a wizard's tower of some sort called the Archives of Gno, and then battled with a whole host of little skeleton boys and imps. So there's a lot going on in about 30 minutes. It's interesting to be thrown along at that speed, though, because games just aren't made like that anymore. Like, there's no lengthy onboarding here outside of a throwaway combat tutorial that literally appears in minute 3 of the game. And whilst I do appreciate this kind of blast core accelerando, time to get moving from the moment I booted it up, I do think it would have been nice to just chill out a bit early doors and just get a feel for like where I was, for what Jara was as a place, and, you know, just get a read on what David's situation with his wife actually is. I know that Jennifer is introduced as your wife, but they literally share 2 lines of dialogue before she's swept away. Like, we're talking original Double Dragon style motivation for the protagonist here. It's just,
oh God, I forgot about that.
Bad man takes wife and then you're away.
Jesus.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Combat, as you mentioned, is a big deal in this game. You mentioned the almost motion-controlled mouse sword swinging analog thing that the PC version of the game employs. And whilst it's not quite the same when you play it on a pad, it is still an action-heavy, hands-on hack-and-slash game. So it's an action RPG. It's not turn-based or anything like that. Holding the right trigger will ready your sword. Depending on which direction you push the analog stick, you'll then slash either left or right across your body, or spear forwards or swing backwards. And it's a bit clunky at first. It takes a bit of time to get used to, as you can't move when fighting, because the Dreamcast only had one analog stick. But after a few encounters, it starts to feel relatively intuitive. And it's quite nice to feel like, oh, I planned to do that. That little, you know, riposte back and forth and everything else is quite nice. Despite looking like Final Fantasy VII, like I said, it's all real-time combat. And it just makes the breakneck speed of the thing feel all the more relentless, because every scene you walk into, there is a horde of enemies to dispatch pretty much immediately as you cross the scene transition. So in the first few hours, there is just no let-up. You know, an hour in, maybe there's a big story beat, which I won't spoil. The game's, 20-plus years old, but I'll let you find it yourself. And I guess that is intended to give you a bit more motivation to pursue the game's big bads. But I found it quite hard to take much emotional thrust from this scene due to the voice acting and the soundtrack feeling a bit local theatre troupe does Lord of the Rings, if you will. Like, nothing wrong with that. And it was likely a pretty...
Hey, nobody else had done Lord of the Rings in 1999.
No. And this was likely a pretty big budget vocal session for the time, because if you think back to kind of the relative contemporaries, they would either forgo voicing characters at all, or in a lot of cases, like early sort of PlayStation into sort of Dreamcast sort of era, they just rope in some of the dev team to lend a few voices to fill the space. And whatever you say about this game, it's not that. They have people who are doing a directed voice throughout, for better or worse. It's interesting. It's one of those areas of game development, I guess, that in a weird way has aged the project more than the visual aesthetic, because an indie team could make a game that looks like Silver in 2023 by aesthetic choice, but they probably wouldn't make a game that sounds like Silver, both because of the budget constraints in kind of hiring a team of actors to do it, but also because... But yeah, like you say, because the quality of video games voice acting has come such a huge way since those early days. If you play a modern AAA game, the voice cast is Hollywood level. And that's kind of what we now expect. People are telling these big grand stories just through a video game medium. And as we've lamented sometimes, it ends up being that games are a bit more story than they are game at times. It does mean if you just want to have a nice experience through sort of a prestige story, as if you're watching something from HBO, you're probably going to get it in a lot of certainly first-party Sony stuff. As I carried on trucking through the game story, I also started to realise how surprisingly linear Silver is for an RPG. Like, there are kind of side quests now and again, but so far it's essentially been more of a case of just go, 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 as David and his compatriots, whoever is accompanying you at the time, are just chasing Silver's army across the land from A to B to C, fighting the odd boss, collecting maybe a specific MacGuffin to bypass a roadblock to just carry on your linear path. There hasn't, at least so far, been any what I'd call chill out time. I like just exploring a place a bit, and for the most part, almost all of your NPC encounters are just used as an opportunity to push the plot along and keep you moving along the railroad. But I have enjoyed my time with Silver so far. Being entirely honest, I think I would have aimed to play more of it if I hadn't been giving all my free gaming time at the moment to Babylon's Fall before it shuts down.
Yeah.
Because, it takes a lot of time, and it makes me worry, that sort of fear of missing out thing where there's a set deadline in the sky.
Yeah.
I think I probably will return to Silver and pick up David's quest when I have the time, so I can avenge my fallen comrade, so I can hopefully rescue my wife, and maybe she will offer a third line of dialogue if I'm to find her in person. But it's a good time, and it's a game I had heard of before you mentioned it. But I'd heard of it only because at some stage I was collecting Dreamcast games just as part of the Infinite project. And I picked Silver up. I think I played literally 5 minutes just to see what is this game that I've got now, before eventually selling it on when I kind of slimmed down that whole collection. So it wasn't an entirely new thing. I knew at least that it was an action RPG, but I'd never put more than that opening kind of tutorial time into it. And I think it's actually a pretty good time. As soon as you get used to the constraints of that combat system being something a little bit different, when you get used to it not being a sort of turn-based RPG, even if it kind of looks like it might be, as soon as you're into the mindset that this is far closer to, say, I'm going through dungeons essentially Zelda style, and with a very, very limited map that is essentially just, you are here, now you are here, now you are here, and you will not be going back for the most part. It's a good time. So yeah, it's decent.
When I set you the game, I just after I set you the game, I booted up the Dreamcast version on my Steam Deck, emulated wise, just to see how it was, and I ended up playing the first hour or so again, and I really love the game. I think I love how earnest it is, because it is just shamelessly exactly what you said. It's just. I love things like that. Yeah, like I love it when somebody just goes, you know what, fuck it, I'm doing this. Yeah, I'm doing this, and I'm going to care about it as much as humanly possible, even though I totally accept the fact that nobody else will. And I really enjoy that. And I really enjoy. I really do. It's funny, because playing it in a sort of through a modern lens. I realised how. Like you said, relentless the pacing of it is. Yeah. But I remember it being a lot more still when I first played it, but because I really loved these environments. Yeah. And I loved just walk in circles around them a bit before you move on. Well, yeah, especially there's the City of Rain, which is just one of the most atmospheric places in a game I can think of. I love it. And I like the sort of archetype names of the locations as well. Because I think like the ice place is called Winter. I know there's like an underwater cathedral called Spires. There's the Tower of No, as you said. There's Haven. It's just these really just like evocative sort of names to go with these, like broad strokes or fantasy archetype characters as well. And they just really double down on that, and I love it. I found it a bit hard to figure out where I could go on a screen, though. But having said that, I also did play the Game Boy Color version of Alone in the Dark over Christmas, which is that's a stab in the dark of the game.
I think one thing I quite enjoyed, there is that problem, like you say, you can get lost in a scene very easily because they are pre-rendered scenes and it's not always obvious kind of where the ins and outs are.
But there is a button you can hold that shows you where interactive elements are,
and
which I thought was a really modern.
It is
good modern touch.
Yeah, essentially like building pathing into it. Yeah, but I did quite like there's an aesthetic choice to the old fixed camera angles, pre-rendered stuff, that it can have problems because you look at something like Resident Evil. If you didn't grow up playing that, the sort of tank controls and it endlessly point you in weird directions. I think it's basically impossible to get into now if it's not something you experienced before. But
if you like that, you're a cunt.
But for Silver, because it's more top down for the most part, or certainly like closer to being kind of isometric perspective, generally your controller is essentially 1-to-1. So if you go down, you go down and everything else. So it's easy to pick up. And it lets a developer, I guess, when you are rendering those scenes, choose what to show. And I think that helps create some of that atmosphere you mentioned. Because certain stages, you are very small in the background because the picture you've got is really showing the scale of it. Other times you might walk into a corridor where it's much, much closer and you get more of a sort of visual on David and whoever he's with, which doesn't look that great because they are very much like floating individual polygons, Ray-Ban style almost when you get up close. But within the context of everything else, it does give the place kind of a sense of being a real world location. And as much as I said, you're not hanging around places so much because it is very much saying, there's the door, off you go, there's another door, off you go. When you walk through them, you're still getting sort of a sense of traversing, a castle or a forest or wherever you might be going through. It's good. You should play it.
I plan to play more of it.
That was the royal you. That was to our listenership.
Oh, right.
I know you've been
I do
playing
plan to play it. Yeah, I plan to play more of it. Deal with that.
What else have you played?
As in, what game did you set me to play?
James Pond 2?
Codename Project RoboFlop.
That's the one.
Yeah, 16-bit platformer.
That's your lot.
Type game. Christmas themed for this sequel.
Yeah.
Never played the first one. Still haven't.
No, don't need to.
It's very much I think when I played Donald Duck in Quackshot and Mickey Mouse Castle of Illusion, I said how those games were sort of B-tier 16-bit platformers alongside stuff like Aladdin and The Lion King. Especially when you look at the A tiers that are Super Mario World, Donkey Kong Country, Sonic 3 and Knuckles. In fact, it's an insult to say that any other game is just one tier below those. James Pond is another tier lower than the Disney ones, I think.
C and or D, depending on which metric you're using.
I mean, the biggest problem I have with games from this era, and certainly in this style, is that the way they're presented, they just basically haven't figured out how to best use the hardware to do. It's not platforming design; it's just the aesthetic design of these games. Because, to paraphrase Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, they're more preoccupied with what they can do as opposed to what they should do. And I mean this in particular relation to the way that they design the art for backgrounds in platform games. Yeah. Because the background pixel art in James Pond is nauseating. It is so insanely distracting and confusing because you've got there's no sense of depth. There's barely any like parallax scrolling because of how they're presented, or even if they are, it's such repeated motifs and designs that it's like you're being thrown into a tumble dryer with a kaleidoscope in your eye,
which is a good thing.
Yeah. Especially as in some of the levels of James Bond 2 Codename RoboCod, there are actual platforming elements from other stages used as scrolling backgrounds in another level.
Yes.
And that is fucking horrible.
Yeah.
Like, we've said before about how brilliant the 3DS is for 2D platformers.
Yeah.
And it's precisely for this reason, especially for playing like pixel art type 2D platformers like Shovel Knight. I enjoy 10 times more on the 3DS than playing it on another system, because you don't have that differentiation, that clear delineation between what's interactive and what's not.
Yeah.
And Shovel Knight is a very, very well designed game. This is basically telling me to guess whether or not a sprite is interactable or not. I mean, there's also a real lack of coherence in the design of enemies in terms of, because there's also vehicles that you can get in and drive, but there's also some vehicles that are enemies. There are power-ups that look like collectibles, and there are power-ups that look like hazards. That there's no clue or consistency as to what these things are. It's not a nice game to play.
Yeah, but you can do that little stretchy thing.
That is one thing you can do. Like, so aside from just being a straightforward platforming game, the main gimmick that you have is that Mr. Pond can extend his body upwards, ad infinitum. I think
so.
Or basically until you come into contact with something else. I don't know how. Maybe the fact that there's 2 colons in the title is a clue to his internal digestive system. It just keeps adding colons the longer he gets. But again, like the use of that, there's 2 main uses of it. One is to collect things that are too high. The other is to grab onto the underside of platforms. And then you have the same problem that you have in the first thing of knowing what's a platform, where you're meant to go. It's not a good game.
9 out of 10, as good as Sonic Frontiers.
Jesus, no, it's really not good. But I can see why it was appealing at the time, because it's got really nice cartoony sprites. It's bright and colourful, especially James Bond 2 Codename RoboCod with its Christmas theme. There's how many other games can you name with a Christmas theme?
Not many.
Christmas Nights.
Not many.
And it was exactly in the vein of other sort of 2D platform games that weren't those A-list first-party games. It reminded me a little bit of the New Zealand Story that I had on the Master System.
Yes, that's a really good shout, actually. Because New Zealand Story is another game where there's a lot going on. There's a lot of enemies. There's things you can ride, other things that look like you should be able to ride but you can't. There's a lot of power-ups and collectibles that do nothing and sometimes hurt you and sometimes don't. That's an amazingly astute connection, actually. and I don't have any idea if there would be any knowing lineage between them. Because New Zealand Story, I think, is by Taito. It's a Japanese-developed game. James Bond, I'm pretty sure, is UK-developed by a team over here. And generally, the design sensibilities of the 2 regions was just totally separate. But it's odd.
That's really interesting.
That there is there is a really clear, almost accidental overlap. Thinking about it,
that's really funny.
So good spot. Well done, Jonathan Dunn.
Thanks very much. Wasn't even a note I made. Just came to me just now.
Well done. That little brain of yours, ticking away.
A little brain of mine. Now, for reasons unknown, as we briefly discussed when you sent me this, when the game was modernised and re-released on the Game Boy Advance, it could have easily just been ported, but instead all of the levels were redesigned.
I wish I knew why.
Yeah. Help us find out, please.
Yeah, someone answer this question.
The GBA version has the classic GBA problem of having a too small a screen space to see much in advance.
Hooray! Making a 9 out of 10 game even better.
Yeah. Especially as, you know, the Game Boy Advance had the power to do really nice sprite design. Like you look at the port of Rayman, or, you know, I mean, beautiful, big, you know, they can do really, you can see these sprites moving in the resolution that they're meant to be, but then they're too big.
Yeah.
But weirdly, and I don't really know why, because I couldn't quite figure out why, the game felt a lot better to control.
Yeah.
On the Game Boy Advance. And I don't know why, because I couldn't see anything drastic that was being done differently. It might be that, I mean, the stage designs did feel a bit more modern. It still had a few of the similar problems, but it was a bit more coherent. It felt a lot more coherent in terms of like knowing how to get from A to B. It was like, okay, you're going down here, now you're going up here, now you're going down this bit, and bum, 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 as opposed to what? Yeah, I imagine that was the design manifesto for the first game, was just
I'm now interested because it came out on the GBA at the same time. I think it got a port to the PlayStation 1 as well. I think there's a budget port on the PS2 from that era as well. Like, it was getting shopped around. I don't know why. I really do not know why. Recently, you can get it on the Switch. There was a modern Switch version. Is that the same version? Is it the original version?
Is it HD?
Maybe. Am I going to spend money to find out?
You might.
Well, luckily, it doesn't have a physical port. It doesn't have a physical release. Yeah. So I'm less inclined to chuck like $11.99 into it because it would just be digital. But
yeah,
I don't know. I'm interested
just
now.
having a little look at some screenshots.
Do you recognise the layouts? As someone who's played it recently.
I mean, you can see more of the level than you can on the GBA version, so it's probably got the best of both worlds in terms of if it's got the... I mean, I can't really tell. I mean, once you've seen one RoboCod, you've seen them all, haven't you? Famously. It does look a bit... okay, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to play it either, but maybe somebody will run it at like GDQ or something, and then we can enjoy it and laugh, and then donate.
Yes,
please.
Yeah.
All in all, I don't think 16-bit platformers are for me, apart from the aforementioned ones.
Yeah. I think it'd be a good challenge to try and find something that would work for you.
I think it's not a surprise, given that I didn't own a 16-bit console.
Yeah.
So I have no experience of those games. I don't have any nostalgia or any sort of rose-tinted view of those games at all. I didn't have any appreciation for what they were doing at the time. The mad thing is that, you know, I played, you know, the Sonic games on the Sega Saturn, and they felt really modern. Yeah. Particularly, you know, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which is extraordinary. And there's been a lot of games that were featured on your top 100 list that I even though I knew, and I thought, oh, I could give that a go, or I could, you know, boot it up and give it a go on emulator. And I'm just like, it's just, they're frustrating because they're almost doing something that I'm going to really enjoy. And I think maybe that's just because, I missed out on that generation.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't know. See if you can find me. See if you can. I mean, I'm. You know, when we restart doing our Fortnite challenges, I'm certainly up for trying some more games. See if we can find a 16-bit non-first-party game.
Maybe it can be almost like an episode in the future. It's a tasting platter. I'll try and approach it from a few different angles and see if we can find something with
an accompanying wine.
Yeah.
For each game,
Minty can do you an alcohol-free beer tasting menu to go alongside it.
That sounds good. So there we go. That was a lot of games that we've just talked about. That's what we do in a month. We play a lot of games. Specifically, we did enjoy reporting back on Silver and James Pond 2, Codename RoboCod.
Bangers.
Well, as we mentioned, we're going to be taking a little bit of a break from our Fortnite Challenge format, but next week we will be back talking about the next two Playdate games. We're very, very much looking forward to talking about...
You have to check. I haven't got a clue.
Oh yeah, one of them's Zipper. I know that. Hyper Meteor and Zipper.
Ooh.
That's going to be good. I'm looking forward to. I'm looking forward to getting up to speed on those. Zipper, I've already. Well, I think Zipper's great. Spoiler alert. No, just
Don't cheat.
Hyper Meteor and Zipper. Very, very much looking forward to playing and talking about those with you. If you want more out of us, then you can go to our website o3c.games. There's reviews, articles, think pieces, videos, streaming content, loads of stuff. I mean, loads of stuff to enjoy. And if you want to get even more, then you can go to patreon.com/o3cgames, pledge a little bit of money as a regular subscription to us, and you'll get bonus episodes, deleted scenes, outtakes, bonus video content, access to the Discord server, and these episodes ad-free and uncut.
Yeah.
You can chat to us on social media if you want. We're at O3C Games on everything, so reach out, have a laugh. Or you can take us to task individually, or try and buy some games off Chris.
Yeah, please do.
I'm at Jonathan Dunn on Twitter.
I am at Chaz_Hodges.
And we will see you next week for a play date.
It's a play date. It's a play date. It's a play.